What's up, everyone?
What's up?
Welcome back to the channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Sheridan. This is my wife, Blue, and our channel is Color Me Conway. Today, we wanted to touch on the top 5 things that we would recommend people know who are about to go through the IVF process.
Obviously, we're coming from it from a lesbian perspective. That's going to be more of what we're touching base on here. Before we get into the top 5 things, I think one thing to really consider as we're talking about all of this is the fertility clinic that you're using and the sperm donation center that you're using. And, fertility clinic and donor clinic is going to be a big thing to think about. And that's generally for all 5 of the topics we're going to cover is going to be true for all of those things. Yeah. So it's really specific to that. So let's get started.
Yeah. All right, topic number 1 is kind of just perception, the understanding of IVF.
Yeah, I don't know
in general.
Like about you, but when I was thinking about doing fertility stuff, when I thought about IVF, I was like, oh, it's gonna be a million needle prick. It's gonna take months. It's gonna be painful. It's gonna mess up my hormonal cycle for the rest of the year. I don't know. It sounded like a nightmare. And that was not either of our experiences at all.
Yeah.
A lot of these big long needles, we didn't have to use any of those. All of our injections were subcutaneous. It was only about a week and a half of injections.
Yep.
I had some pain, I guess, after the surgery. Sheridan didn't really.
Yeah.
And I got over it within 3 days.
Yeah.
It was all over within a month, and we had made a good number of embryos each.
And that's kind of how we're approaching this sort of from a unique angle of just, being a gay couple, trying to start a family, going the route of IVF. We don't necessarily have infertility issues. There are other challenges that we're trying to overcome. Obviously, no man in the equation, no sperm. But when we were going through or, preparing for the process, so much of IVF,
which I thought was a gay thing primarily. I thought it was gay people are going out and using IVF.
No, not
naivete.
Yeah, so wasn't as scary as we were initially expecting.
Which leads us to point 2.
Point number 2.
I think most of the numbers that you're going to get are going to be from people with infertility.
Right.
When we started, there was a website that when we were trying to decide, should we do IUI, should we do IVF, what are our chances of getting pregnant with each of these?
Yeah.
We went to this website and you could basically enter in all of your information, your age, how long you've been trying, all of this stuff. And it basically tells you the likelihood of a certain method of fertility working for you specifically. They didn't even have an option. They had 10 different fertility issues, but they didn't have an option for no fertility issues. They didn't have a baseline. And that would also apply for someone freezing their eggs or, a single woman who was looking to, or a single person looking to use donor sperm.
Right. Start a family.
Just nothing. And I tried to look for those numbers specifically. I'm a big researcher.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything specific to that. And I thought that was surprising. Another example was when we had to do all these trainings because of COVID. Nothing was in person, so we did online trainings.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times you'll see, higher likelihoods for certain birth defects and certain things like that. But there's always an asterisk that says this might be caused by underlying fertility issues and not necessarily the process. Right. And there's not a lot of information separating those two things right now. What is a result of infertility and what's a result of the actual process. And so that's just kind of something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And point 3. So point 3 is about kind of the nuances of picking a donor and the process that goes with that. I think initially I sort of thought it was go online and pick someone with the features you want and kind of call it a day. But it was honestly way more involved than just that, obviously. What would you say?
I definitely think the DNA is more important than I thought. We had to get basically tested to see if we were carriers for any genetic abnormalities or genetic diseases, and you have to run that against sperm donors.
Right. To make sure that you're both not a carrier for the same thing.
And depending on how old the sperm donor is, they might not have been tested for something that you're a carrier for that's
Right.
frequently screened now.
Not all the profiles are the same.
Right.
When you're going to the different banks, they're not all surfacing up the exact same information. The other one that was interesting for us, a little background, is we wanted to use the same donor. So, all of our kids at some point will basically, be
They'll
related.
be all related. If we have 4
Yes.
kids, all of our kids will be related.
related. So-
Will be half siblings,
Yeah.
regardless of which egg we used for that.
So that was something that, we wanted to do. And going through the IVF process, once you did this blood draw, for both of us, there's something called CMV. And it basically is this thing that won't affect
It's almost
you.
like the chicken pox. It's like you get it as a kid and it's not
Right.
even a big deal.
Most people have it.
Or have
and-
had it at some point, so they
Right.
have antibodies
So
for it.
they're positive for CMV positive. And if you're CMV negative, it doesn't seem to affect you at all unless you're pregnant. And then there are risks if you become pregnant by a CMV positive donor. So what was interesting for us is Blue
I was positive.
was positive and I was negative.
And the other thing about it, it's similar to chickenpox. Almost every single person
Right.
has
The
had
majority
it.
of people have
So
it.
when we filtered on, we had to pick a CMV negative donor all of
Right.
a sudden, and we lost about 90% of our
Right.
options.
Yeah. The options were whittled down really quick to be CMV negative. So that was
Yeah.
another thing that, I don't even know if people think about
I
this
don't know if
stuff. in
straight
their-
people do
right,
this,
there's so many things to consider, and that was one thing that was so wild to me that I was negative, she was positive, and then we had to pick negative, otherwise it could have negatively impacted me in using a CMV positive sperm donor. Number 4. So it's kind of all about process, right?
And we're probably gonna do a much longer video about this, so
Yeah.
we're gonna touch on just big surprising things about the process of IVF
Yeah.
that you might not think about.
First one was kind of needing to meet with a social worker, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
were a little offended at first. We were like, social worker, excuse me? Just because we're
Why?
lesbians, you have to approve us to have a child? But I think anyone having a kid should have this conversation with a social worker.
Yeah,
It
I
was
actually
amazing.
thought it was really good.
Yeah, it was interesting because she has a lot of information about well, she it
Or
was-
he.
or he. It was
For us, it was a she.
In our case. She showed us books about lesbian families and
Yeah.
sperm donation. Talked a little bit about donor conceived individuals and their
Yeah.
perceptions on things and questions we probably hadn't thought about, but it was good
Yeah.
we thought about them before we had we went through this process and now we have a baby.
Yeah.
So she basically told us these are things you need to think about as a parent.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
The other thing that I thought was kind of really surprising, if we're just gonna hit highlights, was all of the paperwork and very all the legality of what happens to your embryos or my embryos if something were to happen to either of us, if we got a divorce, where do we want our eggs to go?
It might be regulated by state.
Yeah.
But if it's not, it's definitely something you should do if your fertility clinic isn't doing it, or if you're going through a back route to cover those things.
Yeah.
Another thing with our clinic specifically, it's probably standard across clinics though, is if it's below a certain quality, they will discard that embryo.
The embryo, if it's below a certain
If it's
quality.
below a certain quality,
Yeah.
or if it has certain chromosome
abnormalities. You basically have to be okay with them discarding that embryo.
And you have to consider what you want to do with extra embryos.
And make sure to do, what's right for you. But point 5. So point 5 is all about insurance. How are you going to make this real? How would you be able to pay for this? So I think one thing to call out is the methods vary in price. So IUI is a lot cheaper than IVF. IVF is quite expensive, especially if you do it out of pocket. And thankfully, when we were going through this process,
It was covered by
we
our
did have it
insurance.
covered by our insurance. Otherwise, I'm not sure we would have been able to, frankly.
Definitely not. And we both were able to do full.
Yeah.
But we only were able to do one IVF cycle for each of us.
Yeah, one
So we
IVF
wouldn't have.
cycle each. So, I think for this point, it's really check to see if it is, and if it is, you know, understand your plan so you can figure out, you know,
it's confusing.
yeah, so you can figure out like what's right for you personally, or you and your partner. So yeah, you know, it's a complex topic.
This is my secret sixth thing that Sheridan doesn't know I'm recording. Focus on what it's for, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You can lose that focus, and I think it's important to remember, like, there's a baby at the end of it. It's crazy. All right,
those were our top 5 things to know and understand about IVF, going through that process. Hope you liked the video, and if you want to see us do, you know, a deeper dive in any one of those topics, put it in the comments.
we're still gonna do it for some of
so
them.
even if you don't, it's coming your way.
Yeah, if you comment it, maybe that'll be the first one we do.
Yeah, that's right. So don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe. We appreciate you watching this video. Thank you, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Catch you on the flippity flip.